I would think you would edit that comment, so Craig goes back to school.
Back to the school. Yeah.
Actually, I think
We're not.
a good case summer, right?
Good afternoon, everyone. So just want to welcome everybody to our special council session of Wednesday, August 30th, 2023. Welcome everyone here today. Welcome councilors and staff. Welcome folks in the gallery who are out to observe. And of course, Mr. Martin, our local media folks. Welcome folks. So great to be here. Call the meeting to order. We acknowledge that we're in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Would you call the roll, shall we, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mayor Scott,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Joseph,
Present.
Councillor Gould,
Present.
Councillor Gilroy,
Present.
Councillor Hotelling. Councillor Redmond has sent her regrets. Councillor McCormick is on Zoom. She is. Councillor Porter
Present.
and Councillor Goodwin is unavailable today as well. She had prior commitment.
Thank you, Shelley. Yeah, it is mentioned that Councillor Redmond mentioned that she's out for personal illness issues. That's why she's not here today. So thank you for that, Shelley. That brings us down on the agenda to 2.1, approval of the agenda. So everyone would have a copy of the agenda as presented. Ask for motion to approve as presented, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Joseph, second by Councillor Porter. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Nay. Motion is carried. Thank you. 2.2. So we have two public hearings today. We'll go right into those. So 2.2.1, public hearing request to rezone PID 25451535, Elder Shore Properties Limited on the Gulf Shore. Mr. Boone will lead us through this when we get to that point. So this public hearing is being held as per the provisions of the Municipal Government Act. The purpose of the public hearing is to provide the public with the opportunity to express their views on the proposed amendments before council makes its final decision. So with that, I will call the public hearing to order, and I'll call upon Mr. Boone to lead us, the Director of Planning, to lead us through this process. Mr. Boone, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon. In keeping with the requirements for the zoning processes, this public hearing is required in order to allow input to any planning changes or planning documents or amendments that the municipality brings forward. The public hearing was advertised as required under the Municipal Government Act. And at this point, and I confirm with the clerk as well as staff that no written or verbal inquiries were made on this application. This application was presented to council as part of the first reading with a detailed background on the rezoning request. The request is made by Elder Shore Properties Limited.
Just to recognize that Mr. Felderhoff, the developer and the owner of the land, is here today. He doesn't have a plan to make any formal presentation, but can certainly answer any questions once I complete the presentation. The rezoning is, as a reminder, and it was in your package to the original presentation, is from agricultural zone to recreational residential. So from the AG to the R rec zone. This is in keeping with the spirit, Your Worship, of the adjacent land uses and the neighborhood character. It's obviously what we're seeing happening along the high demands on our rural areas, and lots of opportunity for new homes, both seasonal and year round. So in reviewing it, it's in keeping with our policies under our municipal planning strategy. And as mentioned, it's in keeping with the character of that neighborhood. So staff had recommended a report favorably at first reading, and with no other inquiries or submissions, we stand behind that recommendation, Your Worship. And I can answer any questions or any specific clarification that should be required.
Thank you, sir. Were there any are there any written submissions before we get into any speakers present? No?
Yeah, no, Your Worship, no written or verbal inquiries, because we on occasion will just have phone calls looking for clarity, but no calls on this particular
Thank
application.
you. And are we aware if there's anyone from the public here today that wishes to speak or question?
No one had made a request, but not sure if the clerk had. We confirmed no one had. Mr. Felderhoff, as I mentioned, is here just to support his application should there be any questions.
Great, thank you. So there's no one for the public here. So we'll now public hearing will now conclude with final questions. If any councilors or any comments from staff in regards to either Mr. Felderhoff himself or council have any questions for Mr. Boone. Oh, seeing none, public hearing is now closed. Thank you, sir. That brings us to 2.2.2, public hearing and proposed rezoning for Sergeant and Perrin Parsboro. Again, the public hearing is being held as per the provisions of the Municipal Government Act. Purpose of the public hearing is to provide the public with the opportunity to express their views on proposed amendments before council makes its final decision. Public hearing is now called to order. Mr. Boone, your presentation, please.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Once again, this is a rezoning application, so as required by the Municipal Government Act. This public hearing was duly advertised as required. In review of the applications, there was no written submissions. We did have one verbal inquiry on the application, Your Worship, provided response and information to the individual resident from the area. They had advised if they had any further concerns, they would make a representation here today at the public hearing. I have not had any additional contact since providing them that information. So again, in keeping with the review of policy, the changes here are a little bit more complicated. And if you refer to the report, there's a number of properties that are being rezoned and they're not all going to the same zone, but ultimately they're all coming from the rural industrial zone and they're moving on to onto two different zones, agricultural zone and country residential. And the reason there's two different zones in the review with the planning staff and with the applicant, some of the existing uses on the property, which are agricultural, are more appropriate for the agricultural zone. So thus the applicant had requested same. And in respect to going from industrial rural to the to the country residential zone, there is a desire by the landowners to have an opportunity to do some residential development, which is not permitted in the industrial zone. So these again are in keeping with the spirit of the neighborhood, which is a combination of country commercial. It's also an area where we do have some multi-residential zones adjacent, as well as not far from this location, Your Worship, we actually get into the RLO or the low density residential that's in the more in the core area of the community of Parsboro. So once again, I feel it's in keeping with our policy. The request for rezoning make a lot of sense from respect to existing land uses. And that's what we try to do with that chart to give a little bit more direction to council in making this in the public hearing and in making your ultimate decisions on the application. So should there be any other questions, Your Worship? This is preparing the lands for future development. There's nothing specific yet with the possibility of one residential home that they'd like to put on the property in the short term. So unless there's questions, Your Worship, I'm not aware of anyone that's entered for the public hearing.
Thank you, sir. So have we received any written submissions?
No written submissions, just that one verbal inquiry that I detailed.
Okay, thank you. So again, is anyone from the public here wishes to speak? Now is their opportunity. I don't know, we've been made aware of anyone, shall we? No. Great, thank you. So the public hearing will now conclude with final questions from council staff. Any questions for Mr. Boone from council? I just have one, if we could. So to understand correctly, the changing from the rural industrial to country residential, those ones that are on the list will allow for development of, for example, residents. The ones that are being changed to agricultural will just allow for continued use of those properties for agricultural purposes. Correct?
Yeah, our agricultural zone does allow some low density residential, Your Worship.
Does?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Boone? Seeing none, as I said, the public hearing is now closed. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council.
That brings us down to number 3, organizational policy and bylaw items. 3.1, first reading of proposed rezoning for the Powell and Scallion Wentworth Station PID 2535, 8581 and 2526 7402. Mr. Boone, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was packing up my goodies to go home a little too quick. Yeah.
Hurry before you get away on us.
Yeah, I was going to bring my staff in to do this one. So, Your Worship, thank you. This is a first reading of the application for rezoning. This is in Wentworth Station. In the review of the policies and preparing the report with our planning consultants, it aligns with our policy. I think this goes back to another area within the county that's in high demand for residential development in our rural communities that we've seen over the last couple of years, certainly in keeping with the spirit again and the kind of adjacent land uses and the character of the neighborhood. that's before us. So again, this is going, going forward to allow us to get to the recreational residential zone, which is a little bit more open in respect to residential developments, especially in respect to the size of lots. This area will still be subject to a subdivision application in the future, which will then determine on-site system requirements for septics and wells. So that will all be part of the future process. So at this point is just preparing the land for rezoning that will permit the smaller residential lots and allow the development residential a little bit more straightforward, if you will. So unless there's specific questions, Your Worship, this will be organized for a public hearing similar to the ones we just held, and we'll look to do that if council is pleasures to do so. So unless there's specific questions.
Great. Thank you. So the recommended motion is the council approve first reading of an amendment to Schedule A of the land use bylaw and to schedule a public hearing for the proposed amendment at a future council meeting for the following rezonings: PID 25358583A1 from rural resource to recreational residential, and PID 252670402 western portion from rural resource to recreational residential. If someone would like to make that motion, please. Moved by Councilor Gilroy, second by Councilor Gould. Any questions or comments from Mr. Boone in regards to this agenda item? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Now you can go.
Thank you.
That brings us down to agenda item 4, business issues. So 4.1, development agreement approval process. Councilor Redmond was going to speak to this. I know she is very interested in this issue, but I think Mr. Cracken is going to speak to this on her behalf.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. In your package, there's an email from an area developer through Councilor Redmond inquiring as to council's ability to quicken the development approval process. Of course, the Municipal Government Act clearly outlines the process for development and the requirement for, posting first, second readings, public meetings, for example, are clearly stated within the Municipal Government Act. For first readings, we need to post them like minimum 14 days, and second readings, 7 days, combined with meeting schedules and submission deadlines for weekly newspapers, that sort of thing. It can take some time. We could expedite possibly this by 2 to 3 weeks by being able to advertise immediately after a council decision or a council meeting online versus having to wait for a local paper to be published in a week or two's time. The time issues that we don't have daily papers anymore. So back when the MGA was written, we probably had daily papers in all the communities still. As we know, that's changed considerably. I'll ask our municipal clerk or our director of plan development and planning if they have anything else to offer. But one thing that council could consider is a motion to write the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs to request an amendment to the MGA to allow for social media advertising as an acceptable advertisement and not a requirement for weekly papers be used for public development notices. This could again expedite the process by, talking to our director of development and planning 2 or 3 weeks and possibly even more. So I'll leave that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So if someone would like to make a motion in regards to writing a letter on behalf of what Mr. McCracken said, it will be in order. Moved by Councilor Gilroy, second by Deputy Mayor Joseph. Any questions or comments? Seeing them, Deputy Mayor Joseph.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think with the diminishing of local newspapers and them kind of kiboshing, hate to say it, rural Nova Scotia, I think our only plan is to move to social media for now, and maybe something else can be put out. But this will be a great move moving forward, or step moving forward to get stuff done faster. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. Thank you. 4.2, approval of contract for Cumberland Blues. Mr. McCracken.
Thank you, Worship. As you know, the Cumberland Blues Junior B Hockey Club are annual users of our Richard Calder Arena. and other spaces in the Dr. Carson Mary Murray Community Center. And we signed an annual agreement with them, and we're due for another agreement very soon. The municipality's ice allocation policy sets out rates for hourly ice use. And our fees policy sets out rates associated with renting other spaces within the Dr. Carson and Mary Murray Community Center. In recent past, the Cumberland Blues Junior B Hockey Club, through formal agreement with the municipality, have been exempt from paying most of its fees associated with ice and other spaces in the community center. This year, staff are recommending a similar agreement be signed with the club. The attached agreement is being proposed, and I've received written confirmation from the club that they are in agreement with the terms of the agreement. There's many clauses in there, but 5 through 11 speak to, I guess, their access to space and what they pay and throughout the year. And so this is all free of charge. So it's, access for space for practices and games and playoffs, that's what training camps, that sort of thing, as well as being able to use the CIBC room a couple times a year, as well as a dry pad event on our once a year as well. As per council's direction, the club provided the annual financial statements for the last 3 years. It's our view that starting to charge the club for ice could make the club unviable this season. So hourly bookings remain consistent. We would be exempting the club approximately $13,700 based on last year's fees if we do not charge the club again this year. And this would increase, of course, 15% with the newly approved rates from council at a previous meeting. The council may choose one of the following: support the recommended agreements. As mentioned, the Blues are in full agreement with this as well, or recommend changes and to go back to the Blues and re-engage them in negotiations. And there's a recommendation in your package.
Thank you, sir. So the recommended motion is that council approve the 2023-24 agreement between the municipality and the Cumberland Blues Hockey Club. Someone would like to make that motion, please? Moved by Deputy Mayor Joseph, seconded by Councillor Hoteling. Questions or comments for Mr. Kraken? Seeing none. Call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aren't minded, nay. Motion is carried. Thank you, sir. 4.3, approval of contract Spring Hill Coal Miners, Mr. Kraken.
Thank you, Worship. The Spring Hill Coal Miners Senior A Men's Hockey Club are in their second season, and their home rink is the Richard Calder Arena. Last year, the municipality signed an agreement with the club, and the current agreement expires on August 31st. The municipality's ISO allocation policy sets out rates for hourly use for Richard Calder Arena. In the coal miners' inaugural year, easy for me to say, they signed an agreement to pay fees according to this policy. Partial way through the year, the club requests a break on the fees, and council approved 50% rate reduction for the remaining regular season games. This year, staff are recommending extending the 50% rate reduction to all ice time used by the club in 2023-24 season. The attached agreement is being proposed, and I've received written confirmation from the club that they're in full agreement with the terms within. There are a number of clauses, of course, that outline the conditions of note. Clauses 4, 5, and 6 outline the conditions and proposed discounted fees for use of the arena and other spaces. As per council's direction, the club provided their annual financial statements for last year. The club also still owes the municipality for over $2,100 from last year, and that would be a condition of them using the arena again this year, would be to pay their $2,100 from last year. In recent communications with the club's owner, they intend to do this. Understand it will be a condition. In terms of financial implications, hourly bookings remain consistent. We would be exempting the club approximately $3,164.80 based on newly approved fee rates. The council may choose to do one of the following: support the recommended agreements, or recommend changes to the agreement and direct staff to re-engage the club. There's a motion in your package.
Thank you, sir. The recommended motion is that council approve the 2023-24 agreement between the municipality and the Spring Hill Coal Miners Senior A Men's Hockey Club, contingent on the club paying its outstanding balance for ice fees for the 2022-23 season. Someone would like to make that motion, please? Moved by Councillor McCormick, second by Councillor Gilroy. Any questions or comments in regards to this agenda item? Seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. Thank you, sir. 4.4, vehicle hoist contract award. Mr. Walcrest, Director of Public Works, who's not here.
I can,
You speak on, are you?
I'm on, yeah. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you.
Yes, our Director of Public Works is on vacation and happy to speak to this. So council has approved the capital budget for 2023-24 fiscal year. Purchase of a vehicle lift for Public Works Garage in Upper Nepean was included as one of the approved capital budget items. The Upper Nepean Public Works Garage is used by mechanics on staff to repair municipal vehicles and fire service equipment. The addition of a vehicle lift at this facility will increase productivity and safety of mechanics while maintaining the equipment. An RFP for the hoist closed on June 23rd. 3 compliant bids were received for this project. They were reviewed and found the 3 bids submitted satisfied all requirements of the tender. The project has a budget of $32,000. The identified source of funding is capital reserves. The proposals, as you can see in the table, all exceeded the budget, and the lowest proposal by $9,818.15, and 8 cents. So in case where things are over 25% over a budget amount, the CAO needs to seek approval of council. Our staff needs to seek approval of council per our procurement policy. So in this case, council is asked to consider the motion in your package to supply and install for the recommended bidder for the vehicle hoist.
Thank you. The recommended motion is that council award RFP MCC 2306, supply and installation of one four-post vehicle lift to Nova Truck Centers for a value of $41,815.08, including non-recoverable HST. If someone would like to make that motion, please. Moved by Councillor Gould, second by Councillor Gilroy. Questions or comments in regards to this agenda item from Mr. McCracken? Seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. Thank you, sir. And the last agenda item for today is 4.5 LED roadway lighting. Mr. McCracken, can you speak to this item?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Mayor Scott and I were provided a presentation a few weeks back by LED roadway lighting on their lineup of sensor products that they manufacture here locally and install. Included in their product line are small video cameras that are mounted sort of on top of an existing light standard, such as a street light. These motion sensor cameras could be used for surveillance purposes at strategically identified locations throughout the county. As you know, we've had some regular instances of vandalism in our parks this summer, such as Lions Park and Spring Hill, as well as the newly opened Parsboro Playground area. These 2 places could be spots where cameras may be beneficial in surveying the premises. LED roadway lighting is offered to install 6 cameras at locations of our choosing as a pilot for a year, free of charge. Of course, after the pilot, it would be $1,495 per sensor for hardware. That would be a one-time purchase, as well as $778 per sensor for the annual service plan. Therefore, year 2 would look like more like a $15,600 investment. And that would be reduced to, because we'd have those one-time purchases for the sensors, that'd be reduced to a $5,300 annual expense afterwards, year 3 onward, given that prices would remain the same, or assuming that the prices would remain the same. Currently, we're in the exploratory stages, and I can turn it back to you, Mayor Scott, if you have any other comments from our meeting with the folks at LED.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And unfortunately, we're in an environment now where we have to seriously, I think, like other municipalities, look at this type of security for our residents, for business. I think another application probably hesitant to say it, but one of the things that's been topical lately is the Pugwash transfer station, for example. I know there's an issue around powering that out there, but you know, there are probably some other examples of applications throughout the municipality where it would be of use, because they'll do, you know, they'll do motion detection, they will do speed, they will do dust control, they will do or indication, they'll do, there's lots that it can do. It's just determine what it is our priorities are. So I don't think we were looking for any kind of decision or today. It's just more to give you the information, tell you it's in the works. And I know communities are calling, asking, particularly Parishville have called many times, the Board of Trade, Main Street down there is just, they're experiencing, and that new playground that's been put in there, it's a shame that you know, people have vandalized that within a few weeks of opening. You know, it's a lot of volunteer work there. So they've reached out often. We've seen some of our own issues here in the municipality that there's probably good application for it. And anyway, and they offer a good service. So we're hoping maybe by the next meeting, there'll be some looking for some direction from council in regards to staff, what the next steps may be. So more to share information today, I think, to let you know, bring you up to speed on what's happening, and just maybe you think about it yourselves over the next few weeks, and we'll see what happens in September. Anything else?
No.
Any
that's
question
great.
from anyone in regards to that? Councilor Gould.
Thank you.
Worship, just a couple quick questions. One is, when you're doing your discussions with them and before their presentations, one of the questions that I would have is, at the end of the year, are we obligated to keep these units? And is there a possibility that we might say, well, we'll just go with 3, or is that going to be an option for them? And the other thing would be, are they able to move if we decide that, okay, we don't need one there anymore, but we want to move it to a different spot somewhere else in the county? Is that an option as well with that?
Yeah, those are good questions. My understanding is that the pilot would be, no obligation afterwards. And your question about moving the sensors, I could ask them, but the way they work, they install right on the top of a street light. So I assume once we purchase them, we could have them moved in year 2, and it might not cost us anything, but year 3, there might be a fee for us to move them from, unless we're able to move them ourselves, but I can't see that without specialized equipment. So I would say they are very transferable and movable. Just probably be a cost associated with that.
Thank you. Before we go to.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we go to Deputy Mayor Joseph, so my understanding from talking to them, they're quite interested in doing something with the municipality. I think they're quite flexible.
Mhm.
They'd want to contract eventually, but they want to try it for a year. Let us try it. They try it, then we decide. And absolutely. So they build these lights themselves, so that the portion that they would install for the security part that was on top is theirs as well. So they own it. They build it all. And the municipality's got thousands, I believe that have been built by them that we now have in our, in use throughout the municipality. So I think they're easily transferable, Councilor Gould, to wherever maybe there's a need. Maybe there's the need in an area of Pugwash for a while, and then it's determined it's not needed any longer without purchasing more. Maybe we can move them to a location. I think that's the idea. Hope it is anyway. So yeah, thank you. Mayor Joseph.
Just to elaborate more of that, and the councils that were down there at the NSFM conference last fall. Yes, they're transferable, and most communities are going with the speed sensor and the camera. The camera shoots both ways, up and down. So they'll put the speed sensor either on each end of these cameras, and at any time you can move them. However, it's at our cost. It's more or less contacting a bucket truck company and having a contract with them, or getting them to do it, to move to different areas of problem areas too. So they're not set only, and we get 6, they're not set. Issues in Pugwash, issues in Parsboro, Fort Lawrence, wherever, they can be easily moved. But they told me straight out, it's at our cost. Thank you, Worship.
Any other questions or comments? Nope, all good. Again, it's just for information, but anyway, folks, that brings us to the end of our agenda for the day. So I'd ask for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councilor Gilroy. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks. Remind you, we're back here in a while for in camera, right? Thank you.
3:45.
3:45, right? So 15 minutes. I asked